Had one request from those that watch online, and that is that those who ask questions or have comments from the floor, that you speak loudly, or that I repeat your question. So it could be that they hear better maybe than what you and I would hear in the room. So we welcome those that join us online. Shabbat Shalom to you as well. And we apologize for any technical delays or problems. I understand there's a little bit of a latency between our broadcast and the actual viewing. Yeah. But we appreciate you joining in. So let's go to Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 33. A little bit of a lengthy reading today, not too much. 32. Chapter 33.
Change it on the board.
Did I have 32 on the board? It's chapter 33, so I'll correct that. I have been known once or twice in my life to make a mistake. So that's at least 3 times that I have messed up in life.
I'm just stoned.
I try to set a high bar and standard.
It's once every 20 years.
Yeah. That's about it, Sam. All right. Verse number 8 and following says, Then Esau said, What do you mean by all this company which I met? And he, that is Yachov, said, To find favor in the eyes of my master. But Esau said, I have enough, my brother. Let what you have remain yours. Yaakov said, No, please. If I have now found favor in your eyes, then receive my present from my hand, because I have seen your face like seeing the face of Elohim, and you were pleased with me. Please take my blessing that is brought to you, because Elohim has favored me, and because I have all I need. I need there being in italics, suggesting that it's not in the original text. So he could be saying to him, I have everything. I have it all. And he urged him, and he took it. And he, this is Esau speaking, said, Let us depart and go, and let me go before you. But he, this is Yaakov speaking, said to him, My master knows that the children are weak, and the flocks and the herds which are nursing are with me. And if the man should drive them hard one day, all the flocks shall die. Please let my master go before his servant, and let me lead on slowly according to the pace of the livestock that go before me, and according to the pace of the children, until I come to my master in Seir. Esau said, Please let me leave with you some of the people who are with me. But he said, Why this? Let me find favor in the eyes of my master. Esau returned that day on his way to Seir. Yaakov set out to Succoth and built himself a house and made booths for his livestock. That's why the name of the place is called Succoth. Yaakov came safely to the city of Shechem, which is in the land of Canaan, when he came from Padan Aram, and he pitched his tent before the city. And he bought the portion of the field where he pitched his tent from the children of Hamor, Shechem's father, for 100 Ketzita. And he set up a slaughter place there, and he called it Elohei Israel. I want to share with you today some thoughts pertaining to the idea of counting the cost and then paying the price. Counting the cost and then paying the price. Now, Vaishlach means, and he sent, and it's from the opening of verse 3 in chapter 32. Yaakov has sent messengers, and the word there is malachim. It is the same word that we translate as angels elsewhere in Scripture. But they are messengers, whether they are sent by human agency, or whether they are sent as divine, not necessarily divine, but spiritual beings. And it would seem then that, as we have been told previously, that Malachim have went up and down on the stairway, or the salam, the ladder between heaven and earth, and he's coming back to that same area that those messengers that came down and accompanied him, or maybe very well still accompanying him. They went to Esau, and the question has been asked in rabbinical commentaries, why did it even bother to let Esau know that he was in the area? Well, the straight path would have taken him right through Esau's front yard. But he could have gone in a roundabout trip and escaped the edge of Esau, and Esau would have never known that he was there. But you can't always dodge problems and issues. There's part of the counting the cost and paying the price. Sometimes you just got to deal with your stuff. And again, with some of the rabbis, the way they calculate how things have transpired in the time frame and their timeline, it could be anywhere from some 20 years to some 36 years since he's seen Esau. It's a long time. So exactly, what he was anticipating, had Esau changed at all? Had Yaakov really changed at all? Obviously, he's changed some. He's a family man now. Let's go to the book of Luke, chapter number 14. And let's read verse 25 through 30 here. Luke 14. Begin with verse 25. The word says, and large crowds were going with him, that is with Yeshua, and turning, he said to them, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters and his own life too, he is unable to be my taught one. And whoever does not bear his stake and come after me is unable to be my taught one. For who of you, wishing to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is unable to finish it, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was unable to finish. If you don't count the whole cost, then you won't know the price that's going to be required to be paid. How often have we gotten into a project and we think, I think I got enough. You're putting together a recipe. Looks like I got enough flour. I think I got enough. It'll do. And then when it doesn't turn out right, it's like, I should have put more flour in there.
One time I did brownies, was going to do brownies, did brownies. I had no eggs. I thought I had eggs, but I had no eggs. So what does an egg do anyway? I know what it doesn't do. Brownies about yay high,
About a half inch high.
Yeah.
So for those online, when you make brownies, you have to have eggs. All right. So Yeshua has urged us here in this text to count the cost of our endeavors before him, to be decisive and determined, to start and finish what we set out to do. I've shared this before. It's a good time to throw this in again. It's not how well you start, it's how well you finish that's important. Over and again, we see scripture examples of people who started out really well, but they didn't finish too well. You may be the slower out of the blocks, but if you're across the finish line, that's saying something. He warns us that the price we will pay will be heavy and costly in regards to relationships. If you don't hate your father, your mother, your sister, your brother, your wife, and your children in comparison to how you feel about me, you're not worthy of it. He's asking a lot. And he's not just asking, he is requiring. He's not saying, I want you to hate your parents, because the Torah commands us to honor and to love our parents. But we do not put anyone in front of him. We only have one king, one master, one redeemer, and nobody in human form can do for us what Messiah has already done for us.
That's right. That's right.
In Yochanan, John chapter 12, verse 25 through 26, Yeshua said, he who loves his life shall lose it, and he who hates his life in this world shall preserve it for everlasting life. If anyone serves me, let him follow me, and where I am, there my servant also shall be. If anyone serves me, the Father shall value him. Serving Yeshua makes you valuable. Now, in our reading, Yaakov wanted stability and security and shalom. There's nothing wrong with that. We want stability. Oh man, have some stability in our society? Can you imagine such a thing? Security and shalom. Nothing wrong with wanting these things as we seek them for ourselves and we seek them for our children and for our families. But Yaakov had been driven from his family home decades earlier by Esau threatening his life. But he comes back and he uses the word, he says, I have it's translated sojourned with Lavan. The word is Garti, which is a form of the word ger, which means a stranger, or according to the local community, he was an alien, a foreigner. And what he was saying is, for the decades, some 20 years that I spent with Lavan, I was still like a stranger. I never really fit in. I married into the family, but I was never family. Matter of fact, Lavan says, these girls are still my daughters, and all your children are actually my children. And he was basically saying, I could take them if I wanted to, but I was told in a dream by Elohim not to touch you. So you better be thankful. Because if it hadn't been for that dream, I'd be taking everybody back home and leaving you by yourself. And all this sheep and all these herds, they're mine. Don't you just love it? You work hard, you accomplish, you establish, you get somewhere, and then someone else wants to come and lay claim to it. They'd had no part in it. He has 4 wives, at least, to our number, 13 kids, flocks, herds, donkeys, camels, and servants. Where is he going to find a place to put all of this? He needs room. He needs grazing land, he needs water, and he needs fields to plant. So he finds a place outside the city walls of Shechem. And again, when you look down on Shechem from Elon Moreh, which is where Yah met Abraham originally and gave him a revelation of himself, when you look down from that hillside down into the valley beneath, it's a large, wide, long valley that contains today the city of Nablus, which is the site of the ancient city of Shechem. And on the opposite side of the valley to the right is Mount Ebal, the Mount of Cursing. And on the left is Mount Gerizim, which is the Mount of Blessing. And then there is a valley that cuts between the 2 mountains, so that would be the entranceway, one entranceway into that valley floor. So I can imagine that in that valley area somewhere he had found a place for himself. And it says then that he pitches his tent so that his tent's door, when you go out of it, he's looking at the city. But he buys this place and he builds an altar there to Yahweh, calling it El Elohe Israel, the mighty one who is Elohim, or El is the mighty one of Israel. Well, Grandpa Abraham lived in this area. He was right up here on the left on the mountain, and we know that these mountains are significant, and Grandpa moved up and down this valley, so I'm home. You think? By comparison, our recent and current life experiences have not been so different. We have longed for a return to some sense of stability, where political, social, and religious differences were known. We used to have those. But the differences were understood, and we debated them, but we were not necessarily destructive over them. I remember as a kid that some folks were Democrats and some people were Republicans, but they were not fist fighting at the family reunion. At least not over that. It used to be that you could have differences of opinion or persuasion from people, but you talked about it, you may debate it, you might even argue about it a little bit, but at the end of the day, you still sat down and ate together and you considered one another friends. Back in the day, some decades ago, you might vote one way this time and vote another way another time, depending on who the candidate was. Because it was really not a huge difference between them. Some, but you didn't come to blows. Nowadays, if someone disagrees with you, you can receive threats on your life over a different political or social or even religious persuasion. Blatant lies and defamations of character are offered nightly on the evening news. news. And it's reported as news. We've seen it in the last month or so. People's character has been maligned and slandered before even judgment comes in their trials. Riots over, injustices or perceived injustices. And a lot of times we found out that people are rioting and destroying property that really have no skin in the game, so to speak, about the issue. They've been bussed in from somewhere else and given money to throw rocks and bricks. Meanwhile, the city is left destroyed. And obviously, we've seen the spiritual collapse of our society, and then that collapse be applauded more than mourned over. So if we could just get back to a place where all of that really doesn't happen anymore, wouldn't that be a desirable thing? Just to be able to have your life and raise your family and do your job and raise your food and take care of your stuff without intrusion and manipulation and threats and slanders and controls. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing? It's not going to happen. The next time that you and I see that kind of understanding of life, more than likely, unless something radically different changes things, the next time we see that is going to be the kingdom. And then it's going to be on a level that we would have never imagined. We were talking about it earlier. 2024. Can we vote in such a way as to change things? You can change the personnel and the personalities, but the game is still on. Because you're not going to please both sides with anybody. It's not going to happen. Now we can pray for our nation, and we can subdue the powers of evil. But evil is being utilized for a purpose to some degree, for some experience of time, until it comes to a head and the judge appears and makes things right. Because there has to be the full exposure of evil so that evil may be fully dealt with. No more hiding under the rug or behind closed doors. Yah's going to bring them all out and put them on the stage. And we're going to have to endure those days. But hold on. Hold on. So we rightly dream of the coming kingdom of Yeshua. We yearn to escape the moral and violent morass of evil men and their deeds. We imagine the stability of the Torah being the foundation of all avenues of life, political, religious, social, and otherwise. We look for the security that comes from Yeshua reigning as our king. We read about the shalom that will one day fill the earth in that day, and we sigh deeply for its reality. But like Yaakov, we are not home yet. Not yet. What's required of us right now is to continue to calculate and count the cost of our walk before Him and the price of our obedience to build His house. So I want to talk today about 3 different houses that need to be counted in their cost and examined in their price. Now we have Julie Aylet that is a part of our congregation that is now going into the real estate business. So if you have a home to buy or sell, you need to call Julie. But she's been showing homes. Some of them have been put on Facebook, and big, beautiful homes. I looked at one house somebody posted the other day, and it's like $1.195 million in Richmond. Yeah, I was going to ask Johnny for a loan, see if I could get it. 5 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms. And there's about this much room on either side between it and the house next door, literally.
Is that on Monument Avenue?
Down on Monument Avenue.
What'd you say?
Now, it's a nice house.
Not very much room between.
But I'm thinking, I'm not paying almost $1.2 million and not have a little elbow room somewhere. That ain't happening. Right? So that's a cost that I've already imagined that, number one, I couldn't afford the monthly payment on it. Number two, I wouldn't be happy with it if I had it, because I would be living right downtown in the middle of a city. And it's like, that's not me. I need some elbow room. I don't have enough where I'm at now. So we know this, as we have calculated the cost and we've imagined how much of the price would be to pay. We don't belong in Esau's house. We don't belong in his house. Now, we learned last week and maybe the week before from Psalms 137 and verse 7 that Edom or Esau cried out for the city of Jerusalem to be razed and destroyed down to the foundation. Edom cried out for that. That Edom is Esau. They're one and the same. The Bible even scripturally states that. The ones who actually destroyed the city as Esau demanded and carried out that cry were the Romans. In 70 CE, in the Common Era, Roman General Titus and his second in command, Tiberius Julius Alexander, destroyed the city and the temple. I heard a historian that said that someone informed the Romans that there was gold hidden in the mortar joints of the temple, and they destroyed every stone upon the other, looking for the gold. The Roman religious system that furthered the exile. Once the city had been destroyed, Jews that were there were either met their death or went into exile. Very few Jews were left behind. From that time, from 70 CE till today, we have been living what has been called the Roman exile. There are still Jewish families that have never gone back home to the land, and their lineage can be traced back to the beginning of that exile in the year 70. That's a long time. We've been away from the land even further, 2,700 years. That's a long time. But the Roman religious system has furthered that exile, and it has not just raised Jerusalem once, but multiple times. Archaeologists will tell you that the city of Jerusalem that we see currently is built on a heap of further destroyed layers of the city. That they will destroy the city, and then they'll come back and they'll build right on top of the rubble. So the excavations that are going on in and around the city, they go further and further down, and they keep finding older and older stuff that is dated to the Jewish people, proving that they have been there for over 3,000 years. But the Roman system has not only exiled and razed Jerusalem multiple times, but they have sought in their theology to replace Israel as the holder and the beneficiary of the covenant of Abraham. That particular religious system, the house of Esau, the house of Rome, if you will, they desire still, like Esau, to eradicate Israel and take a hold of whatever benefit and relationship he has with God for themselves. It's the Esau system that has re-identified the identity of Messiah. And they preach about him in the model of one called Marcion. Marcion is the one who said there are two gods. There's the God of the Old Testament that is mean, vicious, and judgmental. And then we have the God of the New Testament that is love, peace, grace, and mercy. And so we don't serve the one in the Old Testament. We serve only the one in the New Testament. Now, even though he was branded as a heretic and rejected, his theology still holds sway in many places. The fancy name is supersessionism. The more common name is replacement theology, where there are those who stand and preach that whatever covenants and benefits were promised to Israel, they lost because they crucified the Messiah, and now the church is raised up to take their place, and whatever covenants and benefits were belonged to Israel now belongs to us. That we are the new Israel. From what I understand, Joseph Smith designed Mormonism to basically say the same thing, that they were here in the United States looking for new Israel. Some of those who came escaping religious persecution from Europe and the formation of our country, they were looking for a new promised land. Of course, it's understandable. Mark Twain went to the Middle East and to Israel in particular, and he said, why would anybody ever want to live here? It's swamps and deserts, and there's nothing desirable here. Didn't see a good thing anywhere. Well, thankfully, the Jews have gone home and restored the land to beauty and usefulness. And it's an amazing place. And if you haven't gone, you need a jar on your counter with Israel written on it. And you need to be putting money in there, even if it's just your spare change every day. And you need to be praying, Father, I'm saving, and I need you to send me.
And we need the vaccine mandate to be removed.
And Yah's going to work on that. We'll get her done. Many of us were raised in some version of Esau's home. We may not have been raised Catholic. Someone said that they were raised Catholic. Who was that? Cheryl and Donna and Marie. Well, that explains a lot, ladies, but we'll let that go. But we were all raised in some version of that, whether in the original model or some extension or protesting version thereof. Maybe except for Joyce. Many, as I said, many of us, not all of us, many of us were raised. And as such, we built Esau's houses and buildings. We funded his agendas. And we were taught doctrinally to justify his wrath with anyone who disagrees with whatever the version of truth was that was declared in that house. If you were raised Baptist, then you may have heard sermons that were preached against the Pentecostals and Charismatics. As a Pentecostal, I definitely heard some, poor old Baptists, they don't know what they're missing style sermons. And so we were taught you fight for what you believe. So there was this idea of Esau's arrogance. Esau is plainly revealed as an arrogant individual in that I can sell my birthright and I can give away all that I have. But when it comes to the blessing, it still belongs to me because of who I am. That's just the way it's going to work. Very arrogant. And it demands adherence that their version of truth is the only way to heaven, as they say. Or brother, if you don't believe whatever the element of the doctrine is, then you can't go to heaven. And it's carried over to the Hebraic roots movement. You're not even born again if you don't say his name right. Hello? Can I tell you that I was born again calling him Jesus, and it was a genuine and real life-changing salvation experience. But after he revealed to me, my name is Yeshua, I was amazed that his great mercy and love was extended to me when I didn't even know what his name was. But he knew what my heart was and accepted my cry for salvation even when I didn't know what name I was to use. Now, out of love and honor and respect to him, I will call him by the name that he gave to me. So, should I throw barbs and bombs at those who don't know his name? No. If he can show me, he can show them. And if they won't listen to me, back off and let them listen to him. Sam?
For those in our past that have heard the same teaching that those here have heard about the name, heard about the Torah and all that, and yet they have not embraced that, do you think that shows a condition of their heart?
I just felt bus tires run over top of me there, Sam. Thank you.
I mean, you just said that your heart was, you embraced that, which I think all of us, at least I know we did, because we were seeking for something besides what we were seeing, in the
That
church.
may be the key. You got to see. If you're complacent and happy where you're at, you may not be given that revelation.
Okay, for those online, Sam is asking if those that are where we have come from hear the message, hear the understanding of the name of Yeshua and the need of the Torah, and they don't embrace it as it revealing a heart condition.
Or did they count the cost and it was too expensive?
Or did they count the cost and it's too expensive? Thank you there, Lynn. The bus tire dismissed me there. Joyce, I think you're right, and it was a seeking thing. We were praying, if you remember, for more. We were praying for revival, and we made this statement in prayer. We want everything you have for us. Everything you want to give to us, Yah, we are wanting to receive it. Everything you're wanting to reveal to us, we want to have it revealed. And we were praying for revival in that vein of thought. We were wanting all that we can have of him, seeking that, and then he revealed it. Matter of fact, I've shared this before, but for the sake of those online, I was in prayer in that church building asking for revival, and the Father spoke to my heart and said, I'm going to give you the revival that you've been asking for, but most of your congregation will be so offended by it, they will not receive it. And I thought, man, we've had people hitting the floor frontwards and backwards and vibrate. We've had to carry people to their cars. We've seen demons cast out. We've seen people's lives delivered. We've had incredible worship experiences with flags and dancing and hooting and hollering, and we've been blowing the shofar. And what could be offensive? I mean, we push the boundaries everywhere we know to push them.
I think one of the main things that you prayed was, Father, when you look at me and you look at the church and what I'm doing,
What do you see?
what do you see? And it was as though he showed you, and it wasn't the picture that you thought he was going to show you, and it changed. It changed your heart to where you said, okay, what am I doing wrong? Where am I failing? What are we as a body not embracing and doing? And that's when he showed you the Torah, showed us the Torah, and Yeshua in the Torah.
So Laura is saying that she's reminding us of a prayer. Father, show us what you see when you see ministry done in your name and our church and me and so forth. And what he revealed was unsettling and required subsequent change and alteration, especially as he revealed Yeshua and Torah. Laura and I went to Israel in 2001, and I had never heard the word Torah. Never heard it. If you told me asked me about the Pentateuch, I could have faked an answer about that. I think that's some of the Old Testament. But the word Torah I'd never heard, and I heard the word Torah for the first time on that tour to Israel. And I had to figure out what it was. A little unsettling. Yes, ma'am. Joyce,
I think
speak loud.
sometimes back when we were praying for revival, sometimes we may have that picture of a service gathering with all these people showing up and having a good time, and more people coming in and showing up and having a good time. We say, we've had revival, and we've gone out and gone on. But if he looked at the definition of what we were praying for, one of the definitions is an instant of something becoming popular, active, or important again. The Torah was revived in our lives.
Say that definition again. Something becoming
Popular, active, or important again.
popular, active, or important again.
Yeah.
Say the last part you said about the Torah being.
Oh, and the Torah has been revived in our lives.
Yes. Yah revived the Torah to us.
He made it
And
important again.
his statement to me was true. About half of the congregation went with where we were going, and the other half did not. And it basically, even among my leadership, it came down to a split right down between the middle of all of them. Why? Because we were being Jewish, some said. And we quit celebrating some of the more traditional holidays that we thought was problematic in the scripture. And we quit eating certain things. It comes down to this. The name Yeshua, Shabbat, and diet,
And Christmas.
and holidays. Those are the issues that really are the sieve that we're sifted through. Right? In Esau's house, if you dare to live or act one step out of line, you will be controlled by shame. Because you're not towing the line or agreeing. In Esau's house, the popular message is blessing for everybody. You're blessed, and I'm blessed. We're going to church to get a blessing. I want my blessing. And there's nothing wrong with blessings. I'm sorry, go ahead.
What do you mean in Esau's house?
Esau's house is the religious, it is the religious church system. I'm not talking about those that are born again and righteously seeking after the Father's face, who's still attending on Sunday morning a worship service. There is a professional, glitz, glam, polished, pageant-oriented system, and it gives people a religious feel-good experience. I've sat through the singing and the preaching, and I've paid my dues, and I feel affirmed and religiously competent, and I've done what generations have done before me. and I don't try to hurt anybody, and I try to be a good citizen. But are you really born again? No, I'm never. I'm not changed on the inside. I'm religious on the outside. That's Esau. I will play the role when it's necessary. I'm not about the covenant. I want the benefit of the covenant, but don't ask me to love the one who gives the covenant, because I just want the religious benefit. And when they're dead and buried, what do we all say? They were a good person. And we know that they're looking down on us with their angel wings. And everybody feels good. But this is not a covenant relationship. This is a religious house orientation. Matter of fact, the number one head of this system, the Pope, called just a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. I saw the video. There was a large gathering, and an emissary from the Pope came and said, I have a message from the Pope. And this is what the Pope said. The protest is over, and it's time for everyone to come home. And there was tears and this feeling of family and awe. Everybody started hugging and praying on one another, with one another. And I thought, you can't go back. I'm not against Catholics. I'm not against the people in that system. We're to love them and pray for them. And there are some awesome people who would genuflect and take the communion. They do good work. They love. They do a lot of what the scripture requires. But Yah says no to idolatry. The system promotes the idolatry and the replacement and the veneration of Mary alongside, if not in front of Yeshua. Yeshua's still not hanging on the cross anymore. He's risen, people. He's not dying. He's alive. He's not on the cross anymore. Me confessing my sins to you in order that you would pray for me is a wonderful thing. It's scriptural. But me to confess my sins to you and receive penance, so many Our Fathers and Hail Marys, and do this and that, and your sin will be forgiven. You can't do that. Not scriptural.
It's not scriptural.
We don't belong in Esau's house. In chapter 33, look at verse 14 again. Am I being mean today? No? Okay. Just want to make sure. And verse number 14. They're talking about how they're going to walk together or whether they can walk together. And Yaakov says, you go ahead and I'll follow behind. And the last line says, until I come to my master in Seir, Mount Seir. You see that? There is no record or text that I can find to state that Yaakov ever went to live with Esau in Mount Seir. That hasn't happened yet. But we do have a prophecy that it will take place. Let's go to the book of Obadiah. What? Obadiah. And for those that will be looking at a long time, if you had the scriptures, it's page 617.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It's right after the book of Amos. Go to Amos and hang a right. Or go to Jonah and hang a left. It's only one page. And Obadiah, chapter 1, that's all there is, just one chapter. Verse 17 and following. But on Mount Sion there shall be an escape, and they shall be set apart. And the house of Yaakov shall possess their possessions. Verse 18 is very important. And the house of Yaakov shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame. Hello, that means you are supposed to be a fiery people, a people filled with the fire of the Spirit.
That's right.
But the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall burn among them, and they shall consume them, so that no survivor is left of the house of Esau, for Yahweh has spoken. Verse 19. They shall possess the south with the mountains of Esau, and low country with the Philistines. And they shall possess the fields of Ephraim, and the fields of Shemiron and Benjamin, and with blood. And exiles of this host of the children of Israel possessed the Canaanites as far as Zarephath, and the exiles of Jerusalem who are in Shepharad possess the cities in the south. He's talking about us coming home. Verse 21, and saviors shall come to Mount Zion to judge the mountains of Esau, and the rain shall belong to Yahweh.
Why is Savior's plural?
Huh?
Why is Savior's plural?
Because that is a role that we are to play, is to be saviors or redeemers or rescuers, if you will. Until we reach this fulfillment, the current relationship that we have between ourselves or Israel and Esau is the Roman exile. Even those who knowingly do not have a Hebraic lineage, we endure under some form of Roman government that has gone awry. In our nation, we have a constitutional republic. When you hear people on TV and thus say we are a democracy, no, we're not. We are not a democracy. Thankfully, we're not a democracy. A democracy, the majority of one and the other side determines the path. And unfortunately, sometimes the louder voices hold sway. We are a constitutional republic, a representative republic.
That's right.
But it's still a Greco-Roman idea. And it's better than any other form of government on the earth. But whatever it is that you and I have, and it has gone awry, and it's not exactly operating as it should, instead of serving the people, and the people having authority over it, it's been turned around on us a bit. And I don't want to get controversial and political here, but just did. Nevertheless, what we have, it pales in comparison to the monarchy that Yeshua will have when he comes to reign. And the reason that it pales in comparison to that monarchy is because our government fails to connect rightly to the Torah. We claim a foundation of Judeo-Christian concepts, but we really don't employ them, unfortunately. But let me tell you, when Yeshua reigns on the earth, the Torah will be employed.
Yes.
And there will not even once throughout the 1,000 years, there will not be a backing away from it, because that will be the law of the land. And Amos chapter 3, verse 3, our text reads this way: would two walk together without having met? A Hebrew scholar, I believe I can attribute this to Moshe Kempinski. I'm not 100% on that. I think he's the one that said this. He said a better translation from the Hebrew is, how can two walk together unless they have a common destination or a common destiny? The reason then that you and I do not belong in the house of Esau is because we do not share the same destiny. And it can be revealed, and commonly what you hear proclaimed from the traditional pulpit is that when we die, we go to heaven. And we're going to spend eternity in heaven. But the covenant says that heaven is coming here. And the end result is Yah dwells with man here. You and I are created out of the dust of the earth because we're earth people. We belong on the earth. Am I against heaven? No. And if he wants to take me to heaven for some duration until the kingdom comes, then I will accept that. But our final abode is not in heaven, but rather the heavenly city comes and dwells upon the earth. A renewed heaven and a renewed earth, yes. But we understand Yah makes his habitation with his creation. What a wonderful thing that will be. Esau says in verse number 12, let me go before you. Let me go first. Isn't that just like Esau? I want to go first. We're back in Bereshit of Genesis 33, verse 12. Let me go before you. I'll go first. So currently he's gone first and he has sway and he rules and he has the advantage. While Israel or Yaakov says, let me go slowly. And he says, according to the pace, our translation says cattle. Another translation says to the pace of the livestock. The word in Hebrew is melakah, and it means occupation, work, or you could say business. Now, for Yaakov, his occupation was the herds and the flocks that were in front of him. But the work and the business of Israel is to build his family into a nation. Esau, you go do what you're going to do. You go run your business and you do your thing and you have power and you have your day and you build your governments and you exercise your strength and you build your house. But I'm going to go to a different pace. I'm on a different time schedule because my time hasn't come yet. You live for this world and its present tense. I'm living for the world that is yet to come. And I'm going to build my family and my people and my house so that they will be situated that when my time comes, the kingdom comes, we'll be ready.
So which word in which verse means Malachah?
In chapter 33, verse number 12, he says,
It's 13.
let us depart and go before you. It's 13, excuse me. And he says, it's actually verse 14. 14. In the middle of the verse, according to the pace of the livestock. That word livestock is melakah, my business, my occupation, my work. What's he say after that? According to the pace of the children. I'm concerned about my children. I want to take care of my children. So we understand then that we don't belong in the house of Esau. Secondly, we don't belong in Shechem's house. Shechem. The name Shechem comes from this area of your body, your upper shoulders and your neck. And it's with this functioning of your body that you're able to turn your head to the right or to the left. It's interesting then that rising up above the valley floor where Shechem is located, you have the Mount of Cursing, Ebal, and the Mount of Blessing, Gerizim. And God says, I have set before you blessing and the curse, life and death. Choose life. And standing on the valley floor of Shechem, you can look to the right or to the left. Which way am I going to go? It's also interesting that Joseph is buried there. And the house of Joseph is still saying they need to make that decision. Multitudes, multitudes, and the valley of decision, the prophet Joel said. What's going on? You need to determine, am I going to live according to his word and live by his commands and accept the blessing, or am I going to turn my neck and head and toward the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and my own wisdom and my own way and live that way and accept the curse? What are we doing? Counting the cost and determine whether we're willing to pay the price to look to the correct mountain or not. So Shechem is a man of decisions. He is the prince. His father, the king of Shechem, is Hamor. So Shechem equals decisions. Hamor, we're going to put it in a nice terminology. He's a donkey.
Uh-huh.
We're online, but we'll be polite today. But he has the same identity as Ishmael, who was also called a wild donkey, Laura said. And they are Hivites. Hivites. A Hivite, the word Hivite means village or villager, one who dwells in a village. Hivite it is from the root word kava, from which we get the name Chava, who is Eve. The Torah calls her Chava, and her name means life giver. A villager, it's the idea of one who dwells, or they live in the village, they're called, or dwell in the village, they're called a villager. So the Hivites are a people of a place to live, so to speak. What's interesting, though, in Aramaic, a sister language to Hebrew, the word Hivite means serpentine. In Aramaic.
That's like the social language.
So one might combine the two ideologies of the word and ask the question, are the Hivites the ones living where the serpent lives? Where else have we heard that? In the book of Revelation, chapter number 2, we've heard this. Revelation, chapter number 2. Look with me, if you will, at verse 13 through 15. Yeshua said, I know your works. He's speaking to the assembly at Pergamos. He said, I know your works, where you dwell, where the throne of Satan is. He lives there. And you hold fast to my name and did not deny the belief in me, even in the days in which Antipas was my trustworthy witness, who was killed near you, where Satan dwells there. Verse 13, Mark. All right. But I hold a few matters against you because you have there those who adhere to the teachings of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel to eat food offered to idols and commit whoring. So you also have those who adhere to the teaching of the Nicolaitans, which teaching I hate. What do the Nicolaitans teach? Spiritual hierarchies. The promotion of people wearing tags and titles, having spiritual authority, and running roughshod basically over their hearers. The professional religious hierarchy system. That's Nicolaitanism. Now, what's interesting is this connects. At Pergamos, Hasatan had those there then that were teaching assimilism. To assimilate. Balaam taught assimilation. Get them to come and party with you. Get them to come and partake with you. To maybe marry in women folk. And we will get them down and deny their own beliefs, and their Elohim will judge them. And what would have been the goal then? If Yah had judged all of Israel, guess who would have gotten Israel's stuff? And so we come to this thing that takes place when Dinah, and I looked it up, is it Dinah? From what I understand, it's pronounced Dinah. Dinah goes to the city. Now, why would she do that? Where is her chaperone? Where are her brothers? Why was she allowed to go alone? Where else have we seen this? Lot and his family pitched their tent so that it says the doors were towards Sodom or Gomorrah. Where did they end up? In the city. She coming out of her tent every day. What is she looking at? She's looking at the city. Let me ask you ladies a question. You live in a tent. Maybe a large and nice tent, but you live in a tent. And you're surrounded by cattle and donkeys and camels and sheep and goats. Has anyone ever smelt a goat pen? I was in Israel and we were up on top of a hill at Perea, and down below at the bottom of the hill, there was a guy and he had a pen and he must have had hundreds of goats. I mean, they could barely move. They were packed in there. And we could stand up on the top of the roof of the house that we were at and look out over to the right-hand side, and we could see the southern end of the Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee. Louetta wanted to go up one morning, and she had her Bible in her hand and her coffee in the other hand, and she walked up the steps, and she was going to go up there and read her Bible and pray and have coffee and look out over the sea. And in about 10 seconds, she was screaming and coming running down the steps. She said, I can't stand it. And I thought, what happened? I went up there. One whiff. The wind was coming up off of the sea and up the hillside, bringing the aroma of the goat pens up there. And I got to tell you, it would knock you down. The stench was unbearable. So Dinah wakes up and what do you have when you have animals like that?
Lots of food. Lots of food.
Yes,
Lots of noise, lots of food.
but you also have flies,
Oh, yes. Lots of food.
cattle flies. The livestock just attracts flies and vermin. And she's surrounded by brothers. What do you wear? You wear stuff that's made from spun wool or leather. It may or may not be attractive. I'm just kind of going down that trail. She's looking in the city. What does the city offer? Colors, fabrics, an opportunity to go to shops and to see something different and to get away from the animals and some sophistication and maybe something to see and some people my own age to talk to. She goes into the city. Shechem, the prince, sees her, and the word says he takes her. The word is lakach. We would transliterate Laqachh, lakach. And the word lakach means to seize, to lay hold of, to take someone by the hand and take them away, or to take one for yourself. Shechem, the prince, seizes her, takes her away, and takes her away for himself.
Must not look too bad or smell too bad.
You know, the other women we're told that they were beautiful or what their physical attributes were. We're not told how she looked. One might assume that she was attractive to some degree. But he takes her, and he takes her literally. And so now she has been compromised and tainted. And it would seem from the storyline that she remains in the city. But word has come out. So what happens? Daddy comes out and starts talking to Yaakov, my boy and your daughter, these young kids these days, what do we do? We can't stop it. Let's let the kids marry. The prince determines that he loves her. Can I tell you that love does not take? Love gives and love receives in order to bring joy and fulfillment to someone else. But that's not the serpentine doctrine. Yeshua said in Yochanan 14:15, if you love me, you shall guard my commands. That's what love is. In verse 21, he says, he who possesses my commands and guards them, it is he who loves me. And he who loves me shall be loved by my Father. And I shall love him and manifest myself to him. In Yochanan 15 and verse 10, he says, if you guard my commands, you shall stay in my love, even as I have guarded my Father's commands and stay in his love. Now listen what 1 John chapter 5, verse 2 through 4 says. By this we know that we love the children of Elohim. This is how one would love Dinah, when we love Elohim and guard his commands. For this is the love for Elohim, that we guard his commands, and his commands are not heavy, because everyone having been born of Elohim overcomes the world. And this is the overcoming that has overcome the world, our belief. What is belief? It is faithfully carrying out and obeying his commands. So Shechem tells his father, he doesn't ask him, he tells him, take lakach this girl for me for a wife. Shechem, in my estimation, is a spoiled prince, and he's wanting what he wants. I want that girl for me. He's not saying, ask if I can be a husband to her. I want her for my wife. I want her for me. So he's not looking for a righteous covenant relationship with Dinah's family, nor is he looking to join and be part of Elohim, but rather he's taken a girl that appeals to him and he wants her. So Hamor comes preaching that Shechem loves Dinah and promises world peace if only the marriage or the covenant or the treaty could be enacted. So what is he preaching? Assimilation. Be like us. Be one with us. Give up your separate identity and we'll all get along just fine. Can I tell you that this doctrine is still being preached by the UN and the UK and the US and Russia to Israel? Stop trying to be different than all of the other nations. Just play the national political game with the rest of us. Be one of us. And everybody will get along and we will have world peace. The dream of every beauty pageant contestant that has ever existed. But the virgin daughter of Israel has been violated. Literally, she has been raped in the city of the serpent. Scripturally, who is the virgin daughter of Israel? It is Jerusalem. The city of Yah, the city of David. It is where Bethel is. It is Mount Zion. It is the ultimate desire of the nations. Make no mistake about it. Everything that is going on in the earth, all of the manipulations, all of the mandates, all of the political maneuverings in the earth, the schemes of men, what do they want? What are they after? Jerusalem. Zechariah chapter 14, the first 3 verses say this. See, a day shall come for Yahweh, and your spoil shall be divided in your midst. And I shall gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. It says, and the city will be taken, the houses plundered, the women ravished, half of the city shall go into exile, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. In verse 3, and Yahweh shall go forth, and he shall fight against those nations as he fights in the day of battle. When? Verse 4, and that day his feet shall stand upon the Mount of Olives that faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall split in two from east to west, a very great valley, and half of the mountain shall move toward the north, and half of it toward the south. That's a time when an earthquake will come and split that mountain. They will come. They will fight against Jerusalem. They will seek to almost overcome it. But Yah will show up and deliver the city and his people. And woe to those nations that dare rise up against the city of Jerusalem. In that day and historically. When you read the book of Matthew, when it comes to the sifting of the goats and the sheep, it's not people. Read it again. It says nations. Nations are going to be judged according to how they have done. All right, I'm going to move on here and we'll come back to some of this in just a minute. We don't belong in Esau's house. We don't belong in Shechem's house. What we're called to do is to build the house of Elohim. We belong in a completely different house. So let's look at chapter 35, and we're going to finish with this. I don't been longer than I wanted to be. Verse number 1, and Elohim said to Yaakov, arise, go up to Bethel and dwell there and make a slaughter place there to El who appeared to you when you fled from the face of Esau your brother. He's recalling the event that goes all the way back to our previous Torah portion. And then Yaakov gives the preparations to make this trip. Yaakov said to his household and to all who were with him, number 1, put away the foreign mighty ones that are among you. Number 2, cleanse yourselves. And number 3, change your garments. So let's look at that. Number 1, put away your idols. An idol is that which seeks to superimpose its identity over the face of Elohim. Yah says in the 10 Commandments, I will have no other mighty ones before my face. I will not wear the mask of your preferred identity or idol over my face and change my identity to please you. There is only one Elohim. And so when we attribute the status of Elohim to some demon or spirit or idol or imaginative thing, we take that mask and we put it over the face of the real Elohim and say, you are my God. And he says, I will not wear their mask and allow you to re-identify me. So that our re-identifying of Yah, we need to get rid of that. He said, number 2, cleanse yourselves, wash yourselves. A washing is a mikvah and an immersion. Why do we have a mikvah? It changes our status. We go from being among the Goyim to being a part of Israel. We go from being unclean to clean. From tameh to tahor. From darkness to light. From defiled to pure again. From our minds seared with sin to restored innocence. Wouldn't you like to have your innocence restored? Oh, yeah. Enable us to come to you like children with innocence again. So that means to immerse and then put away the things that defile us. In Hebrews 12:1, where it reminds us, lay aside every weight and sin which so easily entangles us. In Ephesians 4, beginning with verse 21 through 27, Rav, if indeed you have heard him and were taught by him, as truth is in Yeshua, that you put off, with regard to your former behavior, the old man, being corrupted according to the desires of the deceit, and be renewed in the spirit of your mind. And then, you then put on the renewed man, which was created according to Elohim in righteousness and set apartness of the truth. Therefore, having put off the false, speak truth, each one with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. Be wroth or angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your rage, nor give place to the devil. Then he says, change your garments. Why would I change my garment? The Hebrew word for garment is beged, B-E-G-E-D, beged. And it means deceit. All of us dress in such a way as to hide our physical flaws. Don't we? Now, some people want to dress to accentuate their flaws. Some folks, I just wish they would dress. You know that there are people who go to Walmart who do not own a mirror. I got that from Mike Clayton. Mike, that's yours.
It's a deliberate shock value.
Thankfully, you folks look like you have a mirror at home and you use it. And I appreciate it. But to change your garments, it means then to change your identity. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 11 through 13. Therefore remember that you, once nations or goyim in the flesh, who are the uncircumcision, by what is called the circumcision, made by hands, that at that time you were without Messiah, excluded from the citizenship of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no expectation, and without Elohim in the world. But now in Messiah, Yeshua, you who were once far off have been brought near by the blood of the Messiah. Your identity has been changed. You're no longer goyim. You're not a Gentile. You're a member of the house of Israel.
That's right.
So we need to stop thinking like the world thinks and think like covenant people think. Stop living according to the manner of life of the nations around us and live according to what his word says. Why? Because you're not who you used to be. So I got a question. In chapter 35, verse 4 of our text, it says, so they gave Yaakov all the foreign mighty ones which were in their hands, and all their earrings which were in their ears, and Yaakov hid them under the terebinth tree which was near Shechem. Where did they get the idols?
Carrying them around since Laban. Speculating.
It's possible, Joyce, that they had them all along. Let me read you something. The book of Deuteronomy, Devarim, chapter 13, begin with verse 12. The command is this: if you hear someone in your city, in one of your cities, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you to dwell in, saying, corrupt men have gone out from among you and enticed the inhabitants of their cities, saying, let us go and serve other gods, which you have not known. Then you shall inquire and search out and ask diligently, and if indeed it's true and certain that such an abomination was committed among you, you shall surely strike the inhabitants of that city with the edge of the sword, utterly destroying it. All that is in it and its livestock with the edge of the sword. Listen to this part. And you shall gather all of its plunder into the middle of the street and completely burn it with fire, the city and all of its plunder, for Yahweh your Elohim. It shall be a heap forever. It shall not be built again. So none of the accursed things shall remain in your hand. That Yahweh may turn from the fierceness of his anger and show you mercy, have compassion on you, and multiply you just as he swore to your fathers, because you've listened to the voice of Yahweh your Elohim to keep all of his commandments, which I command you today, to do what is right in the eyes of Yahweh your Elohim. If a city, a Torah-based city, a covenant city, turns from that and goes into idolatry or an abomination, and the city doesn't deal with the one who committed such a thing, then the whole city bears the judgment. But you burn the city and all its plunder. You don't take anything for yourself. When you read what happened in chapter 24, Bereshit, Genesis chapter 34, verse 27. The sons of Yaakov came upon the slain because they said, an abomination has been done in the city. What did they require of them? If you're going to marry into our family, all the men have to be, the men circumcised themselves, made themselves men of the covenant. Yaakov's sons discerned, now that there are men of the covenant and they've done an abomination, we are going to go in and strike the city with the edge of the sword. And they destroyed all the men of the city. And it says, they came upon the slain and they plundered the city because they defiled their sister. They took their flocks and their herds and their donkeys and that which was in the city and that which was in the field. And all their wealth and all their little ones and their wives they took captive, and they plundered all that was in the houses. They messed up. And now Yaakov says, we're going to build the house of Elohim. We can't have this stuff. It's cursed. We got to get rid of it. Now the idols that they would have taken evidently were buried. What they did with the people and the flocks we're not told. But I find it interesting in chapter 33, verse 18, in dealing with Esau, Yaakov did it rightly, and it says that he came safely to the city of Shechem. In chapter 34, after this debacle, verse 30 says that he said to them, you trouble me by making me a stench among the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. And he said, they're going to come against us and kill us. But when he goes home, in verse 5 of chapter 35, after they've done what he required of them, got rid of their idols, mikvahed, and changed their garments, it says in verse 5, and they departed, and the fear of Elohim was upon the cities that were all around them, and they did not pursue the sons of Yaakov. If we're going to build the house of Elohim, we've got to do what we're supposed to do. We got to get rid of our idolatries. We need to change our status and be cleansed. The washing of the water of the word, changing us, atoned for by the blood of Yeshua. Change our garments, change our identity. You're not who you used to be. The world and its systems will not fear us until we become who we're supposed to be. As long as we're hidden, subdued, they don't know who we are. Yah's looking to raise up a people that will shake the earth. You can go home, look in the mirror and say, who, me? You. I'm past my prime. I am too, especially next month. I am too. But I'm not done yet.
That's right.
And neither are you. I'm going to tell you this quick story, and then your comments and questions. A little old woman was testifying back in Pentecostal church days about how much she loved the Lord, quote unquote, and how bad she hated the devil. And she said, of the devil, I'm going to punch him and scratch him, and kick him and claw him, and I'm going to bite him until I lose my teeth. And then I'm going to gum him until I die. If you lost your fight, I'm not talking about carrying placards and ranting and raving in the streets and yelling on Facebook and making people mad. I'm talking about living Yeshua out loud.
There you go.
Yes. Yes.
Walk in boldness.
Yes. That's right.
Walk boldly before Him. And if you haven't watched it already, you need to watch Foundations for Life from this past week. And Mike and I talk about living boldly for Messiah. Foundations for Life, number 88. You need to go watch that. Yah's wanting us to make impact. We know where we don't belong. We know what our job is. Our house is not built yet. We're still building.
Yeah.
Let me give you these scriptures and you can go home and read them about building His house. Matthew chapter 16, verse 16 through 19. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 19 through 22. And chapter 4, verse 11 through 16.
With Ephesians, what was that first one? What chapter?
Chapter 2, verse 19 through 22. And then Ephesians chapter 4, verse 11 through 16. First Kepha or Peter, chapter 2, verse 1 through 10. And then Hebrews chapter 3, verse 1 through 6. Build His house. How do we do that? You build His people. You connect with His people. You build relationships and you add people to it. Anyone got questions or thoughts?
One question.
Yes, ma'am?
Do we know what happened to the idols that Rachel took?
I assume that they were buried there.
Did anybody besides her know they were there?
Mike shared this with me, that when she died, she named Benjamin Ben-Oni. That one translation, if you go to the root of Oni, it means idols, son of my idols. It's kind of, you go, Raquel, what do you think? It can be argued that she took the idols of her father because he used them to consult spirits and means of sorcery to discern things. And she took them so he couldn't use them to find them. There's an argument where she worshiped them herself and never let them go, which kind of lends some credibility in that her offspring has struggled with idolatry in various forms, even religious idolatry over the centuries. The prophet Jeremiah, though, says that Raquel is buried by the road, and it is a path of return, and she's there weeping for her children, playing a righteous role in that regard. How do you connect all of that? I don't know. It's a couple different. It's a lot of things pertaining to the Torah. A Hebraic mind, you look at it from this direction, and I look at it from that direction, but we're looking at the same thing. Which one is right? The answer is yes. Multiple viewpoints, all can be correct to some degree.
Could it have been a possibility that she, in trying to keep up with Leah and the children, that she turned to her idol for seeking help getting pregnant, and she attributed her success with Benjamin as the idol helping?
That's a plausible thought.
Son of my idol.
She looked at Yachov and said, "You give me a child or I will die." And he said, Don't put me in the place of Elohim who's kept your womb closed. It's not my fault. Not like I'm not trying, but hello. 3 other women are bearing children from me, so it's not me. Yah's chosen to keep your womb closed.
If she was giving, I know this is just speculation, but if she was giving credit to an idol as being the reason she was pregnant, I mean, let's face it, she didn't live long.
She died in her second childbirth. And I read, who was
She
it?
spoke that against her.
I don't know if it was in Stone Edition's Chumash or whether it was in Rashi's commentary. They had an understanding that she was approximately mid-30s when she died. Because Yaakov was quite a bit older than her, more than likely.
But didn't Yachov pretty much pronounce her dead?
He said, whoever the idols were with, he put a curse on them that they would die.
Not knowing it was her.
Not knowing. Be careful what you say. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I had a comment too. We were reading that when Jacob and Esau had, semi-reconciled there, that Esau says that he's going to go to Seir, and Jacob says, well, I'm going to be a couple of days behind you. But he must have still been afraid because Seir was to the south of where they were located, and Jacob went north. So he did not follow through on the route that he said he was going in. So he went in the opposite direction.
I read an interesting take on that. Let's see if I can get it squared away. But the commentator was saying that Esau wanted, as he represented the Christian, professional Christian vantage point that preaches a Messiah, that if he could get Yaakov to come, who represents more of the Jewish slant, and by comparison, it includes the Torah, they could, one way of looking at it, they would have brought the Messianic kingdom together then. But Yaakov says, no. I'm going to develop my family around the Torah and the Messiah that it reveals. I'm not going to help you bring in your version of the kingdom. But we're going to wait until the right time until I come to Seir. I haven't gotten to Seir yet. I'm going, but not yet. Not your way, not according to your perspective. That was a way of kind of espousing a theory from that. Now, were they thinking all these things? No. I think Yaakov on the Peshat level was just saying, I love you, brother, and I'm glad that we've made up and agreed with each other, but I'm not living with you because I don't trust you.
So, and my second comment was you mentioned the seat of Satan and Pergamos. So that city had the largest Greek altar I think that's ever been found in it. Pergamum.
Oh, pretty, okay.
Where does the
Satan
seed
dwells.
of Satan dwell? Yeah. So that was it. So I heard somebody say, well, where is the seed of Satan today? And he answered this question like this: it's in a museum in Berlin. And the reason for saying that is because they went and took the altar and all the things associated with it, the figurines, the walls, and everything, and they really are in a museum in Berlin.
Yeah, I heard that too.
I'm just saying, it was, just like,
I thought you was getting ready to say that they created a bigger altar in Washington, D.C., but I wouldn't have minded. I mean, I was expecting it to come out of your mouth. I would not be been shocked by that, but
Not that that's Satan's headquarters right now, but nevertheless, that altar, those artifacts were taken.
well, Yeshua, and when you go to read Matthew 16, he's at Caesarea Philippi, and that's where the caves are and the grottos that were created to worship Pan. And he said the gates of hell will not prevail. That was known as the gates of hell, right where they were standing. Laura and I stood there in 2015, and there is a hole that they can't find the bottom. Sacrifices were thrown into that hole, but it was a place of lewd worship to Pan or Bacchus.
Is that near Prevail?
No, that's in Israel.
Yeah.
But it was known, that hole was known as the gates of hell, and Yeshua said, even this place won't prevail against it.
All those 7 churches in Revelation were in Turkey.
Asia Minor area.
Yeah, Anatolia, Western Turkey.
Because I know they all represent different churches, different styles of worship.
Anyone else got a question or comment?
I know it was last week's lesson, we weren't here, but how do we determine the love apples to be? What do they do with them?
They're also known as mandrakes or jasmine flowers, or it's purported to be in ancient medicines an aphrodisiac.
They grow in the wheat fields?
They grow in a field somewhere. I don't know if it's among wheat necessarily, but it's purported to have a stimulating, or yeah, they're eaten, or you take the blooms from them and make a tea or something. Yes, ma'am.
I think that if you look at the picture of a mandrake, it looks like a man. It's a root, and so it looks like possibly it could have 2 arms, 2
Like
legs,
ginseng.
something like that. And so they thought that had fertility powers.
Superstitious or something.
Probably.
Because if it worked, they'd have to be using that. Sell it in the market.
Maybe they used them all up and there aren't anymore. I don't know. Okay, I don't know if I want to ask for any more questions or not.
You'd make them buck.
I think with that last one, we'll stand and pray.
Did you repeat the question? When Sam retires, what is
Good to have you and Joyce back, Sam.
Oh, well, yes.
Slide things up by.
Don't say it, Barry. Don't say it. Don't say it, Barry. Don't say it. Thank you, Father, for joy. Amen.
Yes.
Receive the blessing of his name. Yivarekaka Yahweh vayishma breka. Yahweh panavileka vikuneka. Isa Yahweh panavileka vyasimaka. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you, that he may grant unto you shalom. Sing with me. Shema Israel, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad, Baruch Shekevod, Malchutu, Le'olam Vaed.
Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzei hakamim haaretz. Blessed are you, Yahweh our God, King of this universe, who has brought forth bread from the earth. In the name of your Son, Yeshua, HaMashiach is our bread of life. We give you thanks and praise. Amen.
Amen.